Hello everyone, Phil Likes Fights here with another prediction video going over, I'd say, the four most prevalent boxing cards happening from later tonight into this weekend. I'm looking forward to most of these events. I think that this is going to be a very action-packed week in boxing. And of course, we're starting with none other than Pro Box TV. Shout out Chris Algieri, Long Island guy. And this is a decent card. Let's get into it. So main event, Naji Lopez taking on Manuel Gallegos. So Naji Lopez, as they put on the poster here, the number 7 contender in the WBA, this being in the light heavyweight division, is a very interesting contender. Early on, I wasn't sold on his skills. I wasn't sold on his upper ceiling. But I've come to appreciate Naji Lopez and what he can do. So he's coming into this 15-0 against 22-3 Gallegos. And Gallegos, I think most notably, upset Khalil Ko before losing in the rematch. And Naji Lopez has taken on decent competition. Last time out, took on, I believe, Calvin Hot Sauce Henderson, stopped him in 5 rounds. Has taken on guys with 20 plus wins and less than 10 losses, but this is by far and away the biggest step up in Lopez's career. Gallegos, I think, is tough, can hit, but the two biggest downfalls in Gallegos' career has been his cardio and his durability. Gallegos is durable, but if he reaches a tipping point, he tends to fall off a cliff somewhat immediately. I think Lopez has enough power, enough aggression, and enough strength to make sure that Gallegos never establishes his own rhythm, and I believe that Naji Lopez will stop Gallegos, I would say, around the 6th round. I think he gets through a couple of early on. The first 3 rounds could be a little back and forth, but I think he'll establish himself. Gallegos will feel the pressure, and it'll be all downhill from there. So Naji Lopez, 6th or 7th round knockout. Further on down this card, Dominic Valle taking on Eduardo Ramirez. So Eduardo Ramirez has fought many admirable competitors. He fought Isaac Cruz. He's even fought on Pro Box before against Jonathan Cartozo. He fought Mark Magsayo. He's a very capable fighter. 5 losses, only ever been stopped by Pitbull Cruz. But Dominic Valle, I think, much like Naji Lopez, was a prospect coming through Pro Box that I wasn't 100% sold on. I thought he had some limitations, but I've grown to appreciate his style. I like his output. I like his volume. I think fighters, more often than not, one of their big problems is that they don't throw enough punches, that they let rounds slip away. But I think Valle's contained volume approach will get to Ramirez. I don't think it will be enough to stop him. I think if Valle finds a stoppage over Eduardo Ramirez, that would be a statement. But much like Valle's last fight against Rene Alvarado, another very tough, capable, maybe not so much now world level fighter, but certainly a few years ago a world level fighter, I expect that we see Dominic Valle get a dominant, early, maybe late competitive-ish if Ramirez catches a second wind, but I'm expecting a Valle win. The only other fight I think I really want to talk about on this card is Dante Benjamin, another light heavyweight, who formerly promoted by Top Rank, but now he finds himself in a position, I would say in a quite odd position, because he's still just 23. It feels like we've seen him fight for so long now. It's been 4 years that he's been a pro. His last fight out, he took on Money Powell, the 4th, I believe, on Pro Box, and didn't look great. And here he is up against an 8-0 guy, Angel Lozano, but I think this is a confidence builder for Benjamin, if I'm being quite honest. Benjamin at times has not lived up to the hype. However, His opponent, despite being 8-0, Angel Lozano, I think is very undersized for the weight class. I don't think has the durability for the kind of punching I've seen from Dante Benjamin. You know, he's really fought no one of note. If I just go through the resume here, 2-1 on the Don King promoted Badu Jack Mihalian 2 undercard. Then he fought 7-9-2 opponent, a 6-2 opponent, 3-5, 2-3. None of these opponents really carry any water whatsoever. And again, just based off the eye test, I think Lozano, he tries to do a Philly shell. He tries to slip and rip, but I don't think Benjamin is going to let him establish any of that game plan. I expect a Dante Benjamin by knockout. I don't know if I also want to say 6th round. That might be a cop-out. It's an 8-rounder. I think Benjamin will get to him early. I think that this is not as competitive as the record suggests. I'll say 3rd round. In a fight I expect him to look good. But let's move on here to Saturday morning over in Dublin in the 3 Arena. We've got Jazza Dickens versus Anto Cacace for the WBA World Super Featherweight title, which is 130 pounds. So this is a very, very compelling fight, perhaps the most compelling of the entire weekend. Jazza Dickens is a fighter who's got over 40 bouts to his name, 36-5. When he loses quite devastatingly. A few years back, we saw him get knocked out in Dubai, I believe it was, against Hector Andres Sosa. We saw him, of course, lose to Kid Galahad. But I know British commentators love to use the phrase Indian summer. And that's basically what he's on. He beat Zelfa Barrett in an upset on a Matchroom card. He then went over to an IBA Pro card and beat Albert Batagaziv, who was the WBA interim champion at the time. But since Lamont Roach vacated the title, Dickens has been promoted. But do I think that a run of form of Zelfa Barrett and Batagaziv is enough to beat Anthony Cacace, who is on a great late career run in his own right? Even though he's 37, back-to-back wins over Joe Cordina, Josh Warrington, and Lee Wood. I don't believe so. I think Cacace should win this quite dominantly. I think at 130 pounds, for however long Cacace can make that, and I believe the weigh-ins are done, and I have not heard that he struggled at the weight. Cacace is so large for 130 pounds, and he used to be, I'd say, much more of a point fighter, where he's so much longer than his opponents that he can coast and just outpoint someone easily. But I think he's realized that with more knockouts come better pay, better profile, and at 37, you don't have that much time to leave anything on the table. So I'm expecting Cacace to stop Jazza Dickens. I think Jazza Dickens has a history of losing by knockout. I think if this goes to a decision, honestly, I think it favors Dickens, because Dickens has a very interesting style where he's a good capitalizer, if that's the proper term. He likes to make his opponent make a mistake and then capitalize. Not so much a counter puncher, because he also does fight on the front foot, but I don't suspect he'll be able to do that to Cacace. I think Cacace is too long. Those uppercuts are money, and and also keep in mind, this is happening in Dublin, so the crowd's behind Cacace. It's an Irish event for St. Patrick's Day. I suspect that this is something Cacace has wanted. He's wanted to become a world champion once again after vacating the IBF title. I think everything's on the table for him to pick up another very good win and keep himself very relevant in the 130-pound division, where if we could see him fight against Emmanuel Navarrete, that would be an amazing fight. So give me Cacace, stoppage in maybe the 10th round. I think Dickens, he's going to be in there as long as he can. I think everyone around him is going to understand the opportunity in front of him. but I've just seen him fall short too many times in the past. I'm expecting Cacace to pick up a good win in a competitive fight through 10 before finding the stoppage. Now, moving on down the card to the co-main event, Pierce O'Leary is taking on Maxie Hughes, where this was originally going to be Pierce O'Leary versus Mark Chamberlain. Chamberlain has since pulled out. In comes Maxie Hughes. And I want to pick Maxie Hughes so bad. So Maxie Hughes, much like Jazzy Dickens, a guy who's been through a lot. You know, not so long ago, he was getting stopped by William Zepeda in 4 rounds and that horrible robbery against George Kambosos. Big questions around where does he go, but picked up a win over Gary Coley, Archie Sharp. Those are good wins, very good wins. Last time out, lost to Bakhoudir Usmanov, who you may have never heard of, which is understandable. Again, on one of those IBA pro cards that are Russian promoted. But he performed very ably in that fight. In fact, there's a case that Hughes wins that by a round. I don't think so. I think that fight's either a draw or an Usmanov win, which is how it came out. But Hughes performed very ably. So, it's a loss, but we have to keep in mind that Pierce O'Leary, I recognize Derek Foley on the resume, beat Liam Dillon, who's a very tough out, but I think Dillon is a 30-pounder fighting at 140 for opportunities. I really want to pick Maxie Hughes here by decision. I really do. I think Maxie Hughes is somewhere in between European and world level, and I'm just not sure about that with Pierce O'Leary. I'm not. So if this blows up in my face, if Pierce O'Leary, much like Cacace, feeds off the Irish crowd, so be it. I'll be impressed and I can eat my words, but I'll take Maxie Hughes by decision. And if I'm wrong, so be it. All right, I'll go over one more fight on this card because it is interesting. We have Joan O'Carroll taking on Cole Murphy. So Cole Murphy, I would say, is, I don't know what to make of him. 16-0. I've seen some of his fights on occasional undercards, but he's not some sort of blue chip prospect that I've been scouting since his debut. Whereas Joan O'Carroll, very capable fighter. In fact, before Jazzy Dickens beat Albert Buttigieg, Joan O'Carroll was giving Buttigieg a very good fight before succumbing to a stoppage in the 9th round. Also, earlier in his career, had lost to Maxie Hughes. But he's still a very capable fighter. I think at 33 years of age and the miles on the clock, I think Cole Murphy might get to him. But it might be by decision. I don't like to fence sit, but I also don't like to give uneducated opinions. I feel like I've got a pretty good grip on the main and co-main here, but I'm just hoping for a good fight. How about that? Is that a fine prediction? I'll also point out that some names to look at it for on the undercard is Adam Olinian, who's being the new Queensberry debutant. Gary Coley is coming back after a stint of inactivity, and Thomas No Party Carty is back after losing to one Dewan Calloway after injuring his ankle. But let's move on here. A bit more to get to. Let's talk about, boom, Barbosa Jr. versus Sims Jr., or as I like to say, who cares about that? It's Gabriela Fundora Fight Week, and we've got to talk about one of the best all-action fighters, one of the best pound-for-pound women in the world, Gabriela Fundora. You know I'm always going to bat for her. I think that she's must-see TV, much like her brother. And you know what? I don't care about card order. Let's go over her fight first. So, Fundora coming into this fight, the unified and Ring Magazine champion, taking on Viviana Ruiz, who... this should just be a layup, right? I mean, yeah, Fundora should just roll through her. The problem is Fundora wants the final fighter in this weight class here, and then she plans on moving down, but yeah. Oh, wait, in fact, hold on. No, that's not right. Well, in any case, sorry. But yeah, Fundora's gonna roll through this woman. She's 43, from Australia, out of Colombia, but she's not gonna have anything for Fundora. I expect Fundora to knock her out in 6 rounds. Easy. So Gabriela Fundora on the chase for more titles, more belts, more rings, and what can you say? She's one of the most impressive offensive fighters in the sport. Looking forward to her going out there and building the profile, but I'm not expecting any resistance. In fact, beyond the main event, I don't expect much resistance on this card whatsoever. It's a very poor card by Golden Boy. I'm just going to say it how it is. I understand that they're going through legal issues and some of their fighters are caught up in that, aka Virgil Ortiz and the like. But still, this fight leaves a lot to be desired. But let's get into the actual main event. Arnold Barboza Jr. versus Kenneth Sims. So both these guys are in a very similar position. They were highly ranked at 140 pounds. Barboza beat Jack Catterall in a very impressive win. I mean, it wasn't the best performance, but what have you. Went in there, lost to Teofimo Lopez. Not too much shame in that. Whereas Kenneth Sims Jr., last time out in the hometown, took on the guy that nobody wants to fight in Oscar Duarte. And lost a very close decision that I thought he should have won. But of course, Duarte, you'd have to imagine, not as hard of a challenge as Teofimo Lopez. If I'm giving you my overall feel on this fight, I'm going to pick Kenneth Sims Jr. I feel like I've had a pretty good gauge of where Arnold Barboza has been at in his career. I picked him to beat Jack Catterall as a sizable underdog, where most people thought that Catterall was the heir apparent to the throne at 140 pounds. I'm curious to see how the weight move affects both these fighters. Of course, both are moving up from 140 pounds. I think both have been due to move up in weight. But Kenneth Sims Jr. just does a lot of things in a ring that feel very old school to me. And I will always appreciate a fighter like that. I like how he operates. I like his combinations. Barboza, yes, he's very fundamentally sound, but it's almost to a flaw where sometimes you just wish he would throw a few more punches. He would look to hurt his opponent a little bit more. He loves to coast. He loves to play it safe. And I think Kenneth Sims, if he learned anything from his last fight, don't leave it close. If you can, obviously, sometimes you're just not the better fighter. But in that Duarte fight, I think if he didn't give up a couple of those rounds that he could have put a little more effort into, he wins that fight. And I think he kicks himself knowing that he could have won that. With Barboza against Teofimo, he wasn't winning that fight. He got not shut out, but 10-2, 9-3. So, yeah, I think Kenneth Sims Jr. due for another big win, and I think he'll get it against Barboza Jr. I do. Also on this card, Oscar Collazo taking on Jesus Haro for his title. People claim that there's no one to fight at this weight class, but of course there is. There's the Melvin Jerusalem rematch for unified titles, which got held up in court due to the Golden Boy fiasco. There's also Pedro Tadoran, but Tadoran is going to be fighting Hassanboy Dusmatov in Kyrgyzstan on a the promotion with, oh goodness, but the fight's happening in Kyrgyzstan, I believe, at least. I don't think it's been officially announced, but I've seen reports on that. Those are the other two champions at 5 pounds. However, Collazo is going to be Jesus Haro. I mean, Haro, decent fighter, but just not on the level of Collazo, who's borderline top 15 pound for pound, even with his recent stint. Last time out, he did not look the best against Jason Vason, who had him hurt. But I think Vason would easily beat Jesus Haro. So I will take Collazo here. Also on the card, oh boy, Alexis Rocha, the 147-pound contender, is going to be breaking his stint of inactivity against Jojo Diaz. Jojo Diaz, the man who is 1-4 in his last 5, and 2 and what is this? Hold on. 2-7 in his last 9. Jojo Diaz, who was a world champion at 130 pounds. They're bringing him all the way up to 147 for Alexis Rocha. The funny part is, Rocha, man, sometimes, just like Barbosa, honestly, is another one of these fighters that you watch and you go, can I get a little bit more? Just a little bit? Can I, please? I see a world where even though this is a gross, disgusting mismatch that should not happen, I don't think I have the guts to say that this goes to a decision. I think Rocha has to stop him, right? However, I'll say it's very late on. It's a 10-rounder. They let this fight go into the 9th round for some reason, and then they stop it. But I think Rocha is not going to look great with the inactivity. I think he's going to have it in his head that he goes rounds. Jojo Diaz, I think he'll try to be in there and stay defensive. But, yeah, this is a Rocha landslide. A couple of Golden Boy prospects on the card. Joel Iriarte, one to look for. Also, Caden Griffiths. I like him quite a bit, but they're in such bouts of non-competitiveness. What's the point? I'm sure they'll win. If they lose, I'll talk about it. How about that? Well, let's move on here to the final fight card of the weekend that I have my eye on, and that's over in Japan. So we have U-Next Boxing 5 here with Nonito Donaire taking on Riku Matsuda. We have the return of La Princesa Anthony Olasquaga against Jukiya Imura. We have knockout CP Freshmart against Shokichi Iwata, and Ryusei Matsumoto versus Yuni Takada. This is a very good card. In fact, not to perpetuate the whole stereotypes, but Japan, it's like they got it good over there because this is a great card. Donaire, Matsuda, Olasquaga, Imura. I mean, maybe that one is a little more lopsided, but still. And then CP Freshmart versus Iwata is very interesting. So let's get into this to round out the prediction video here. Let's jump right into it. Nonito Donaire versus Riku Matsuda. Interesting. Nonito Donaire is 43 years old. He's 1-3 in his last 4, if we're going just based off the numbers. At the same time, I can see him winning this fight. He performed so ably against Seiya Tsutsumi. I was not expecting that. I thought that was going to be a clear loss, or he gets stopped. The fact that he did as well as he did against Tsutsumi, who is a very, very capable fighter. I don't think that Nonito is looking to stay in the sport for money. I think he's in the sport to try to break his own record to be oldest bantamweight champion. And I think they view Matsuda as a way to get back to that position. So I'll pick Donaire. And I think, like Rachel Donaire said in the press conference, Donaire loves to knock out southpaws. So I'll take him to knock out a southpaw. I'll say, because Matsuda is a good fighter, but I'm not always, I've seen him fight before, but some of his performances are either mismatches of epic proportion, or it just seems like he's a fighter who loves offense so much that it might just get in the way of him being at that next level. So I'll take Donaire. I'll take him to win by knockout. It's a 10-rounder. But I think Donaire can find it in the 6th round. I think he can. Yeah. I mean, the real reason I'm here saying that I think he'll win is because he took the fight. I don't think Donaire has any reason to take a fight he doesn't suspect he can win. And I'll trust him to do that. I'll go on a limb. I think he'll probably be a slight underdog if I had to guess. But I think he can do it. And if he wins this fight, he's back in the mix in the WBA title picture. Bam Rodriguez very likely is fighting Antonio Vargas next for the WBA bantamweight title. That's on the table. Nonito Donaire versus Bam Rodriguez, if you can believe it. But I suspect he'll win. All right, let's go further down the card here. Let's go to CP Freshmart versus Shokichi Iwata. And you know what? Because of how it's Oscar Collazo fight week, and I've seen multiple things that nobody knows who Collazo has fought. He's never fought anyone good. Knockout CP Freshmart is a very capable fighter, a very good fighter who was champion for a very long time. And his last fight in December against Junior Zarate was one of the best performances of his career. You know, I've watched some people that are much more in the know than I am about fighters from Thailand, boxers, and they've said that, you know, since his fight against Collazo, he got a lot more money than he's used to making for a fight. He's been in better training camps, better nutrition, and even though he's had 30 fights, he's 35 years old, there's an argument that he's just as good as he was, whereas Iwata only lost to Rene Santiago, who's, you know, a good fighter, unified world champion now. We didn't know that at the time, of course. But I've never been, or I'm sorry, because he also lost to Jonathan Gonzalez, right. However, I think, yeah, Iwata fails to impress at times. I think he's been on a KO streak in his wins as of late, but I don't honestly think that he has a huge power presence. I'll go with CP Freshmart. I think he'll win by decision. I don't think he'll get the knockout. If he does, I would be impressed. But I just think this is a clear decision for CP Freshmart. I think reestablishes himself as a champion, and we go from there. But yeah, I respect his skills quite a bit. Also, Anthony Olasquaga taking on Jukiya Imura. I think Olasquaga should win by knockout. I do. He's clearly one of the hardest punchers in the lower weights. He's in a great run of form ever since that loss to Kenshiro Taraji. You know, I thought he lost to Hiroto Koiguchi, but Koiguchi's a very good fighter. It's not exactly disqualifying to have a close fight with him as well. And I'm not going to claim that I know everything about Jukiya, but I suspect that Olasquaga should get the win by knockout, so I'll keep it there. But yeah, overall, looking forward to this. Looking forward to Pro Box happening later on. And without that, yeah, if you like my predictions, again, I always suggest if I got anything wrong, please let me know. I try to keep everything as accurate and poignant as possible. But I'm looking forward to this weekend. It's not got the biggest names, but there's definitely some good matchups. Cacace versus Dickens. I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to Donaire Matsuda. And I think every time Gabriela Fundora fights, you've got to watch. So without that, I will catch you all next time. Bye.